The most dangerous thing a movement can endeavor to do is to purify or create a utopia.
One of the things that I think about in this area is how much, to get this formula to work, it really requires skill. And there's an old definition of a gentleman that I'm very partial to, which is a gentleman is a man who is never rude by accident. And I think one of the problems we're having is that there are people at very different skill levels. And so if you think about, the terrifying words that one must not say, that really is sort of an admonition when everyone is now broadcasting via social media or their, podcasting or Twitter feed, whatever it is, that we're now frightened that people of very low skill and low experience are going to start opining at scale about things that in ways that are really destructive. So, for example, if you think about how far we've come from George Carlin's observations. Carlin died right before the financial crisis. And his perspective was that there wasn't a word you can't say. There are no bad words. There are bad contexts. There are bad people. There may be bad intentions. We're now in a world where Bill Maher is lectured by a guy who founds NWA as to what words he can't say. How does that shake out?
I think that's just a bad idea that will be scrapped eventually. I don't know how much damage it will do.
It's a fad.
But a lot of these bad ideas are repackaged, and they will cause their damage. But hopefully, because we have enough history to draw from, hopefully they will lose their relevance. I worry that there's this strange movement to go back to old-fashioned collectivism. I mean, this old-fashioned idea of socialism and even communism and Marxism, and I don't know what this is. These are young people who don't, and as I really pay attention to it, they don't have a command of history. They don't know a lot. They just don't. Maybe I'm just older and I've done more reading or living. But I lived in those socialist utopias, and I went to those countries when they were very earnestly socialist and communist, and I'm always amazed at these ideas, and they come out of academia. They come out of these professors, and I know a lot of them, and I have arguments with them on my other podcast. They are people who just don't have a lot of it. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how many books you've read. You, my friend, don't make the trains run on time. You, my friend, have never had to turn a profit with a real business. You live behind walls in a university, and those people are important, but they can also be just as dangerous as somebody with no ideas.
So what you point out, just to riff off of that, is that what if you have a system which effectively functions in a cult-like way, which is very few people who are academicians have ever left education. In other words, they start at kindergarten or pre-K.
That's what's going on.
And if you leave, it's very suspicious if you return.
Yeah.
You can't take 5 years off for most people. Now, occasionally there are exceptions, but the system, as a system of selective pressures, is selecting specifically for people who never venture outside their initial environment.
I have talked to very smart academic all-stars. People talk about them all the time without going into names. And one didn't really realize that they were trying to raise some money for something they wanted me to host. And he didn't really understand that there were agents out there that could raise sponsorship. Mm-hmm. He just didn't live in an economic world. But he's very happy to, and we had a big argument about it, he's very happy to advocate for an 80% tax rate for anybody making over $1 million because he wants to go back to what he thinks is Scandinavian-like socialism, which is wrong. Scandinavia doesn't have that kind of a tax rate, so you're wrong. But also this hunter-gatherer ideal. Okay, all right, good luck with that, but you shouldn't be making economic policy. You're not.
So you're bringing up something which I think is terrifying. What happens when the sense-making professions, that is, the people that we deputize as our experts for taking in raw data and saying, okay, tell us what this means and tell us what we should do next. And you find this in education, you find this in let's say journalism and the sort of talking head class, all of these sort of institutional sense makers are caught up in business models which are now selecting for people who have very little experience outside of this world. And I feel like if we don't come up with jobs for that class that pay very well, what you're going to get is you're going to get very ideological people with very little outside experience who are imagining a collectivist world that functions beautifully, but not thinking about the amount of coercion and violence that it would take to accomplish that, and whether or not it's something you want to even do it to begin with.
There's that idea, there's that saying I love, which is an idea is a very dangerous thing to have if it's the only one you have. It's a very dangerous thing if it's the only one you have.
I see.
And I think that there is this orthodoxy, this homogenous, kind of collective mind that comes out of a lot of these places. And you're right. I mean, there's no room. But I have two things to say. One, I worry that a lot of these big companies, to express even a different point of view, even to cite the science behind the difference between men and women, will get you fired.
Well, this
it gets you fired. It really can affect your bottom line. So it is a form of violence, or certainly, what is the word? Coercion in a real sense. Conformity but you know what? Americans are hard to fool, and Americans don't like extremes. And there is a shitload of pushback, not just in this sort of this hard left kind of like mentality, but it's a big pushback, and a lot of intellectual pushback as well, in my opinion. And it's only getting stronger. There's a reason that reasonable people who are responsive to evidence, like yourself, like Jordan Peterson, whoever it might be, there's a reason these people really hit a chord, that people like to listen to them, because they're like, I knew this other stuff wasn't making that much sense. I feel like I'm stuck in this ideological world, and I don't, you guys are calling me racist, or you're telling me I'm not into equality. I'm not even thinking about that. I'm a fair-minded person, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of pushback.
Well, I mentioned this to Sam Harris, and I think I'm going to maybe do a show on this podcast called The Hilbert Problems. The topic would be the Hilbert Problems of Social Justice. And so maybe the easiest one is, you can't possibly understand my experience because you don't share it, and you must understand my experience because it's so important. And so you just take these two things and then you say, look, I want to discuss that as a couplet. I must understand and I cannot understand, because that's your problem after all. And what if I can actually write a screenplay, let's say, or do an impression on a stage where you say, that was so good that there's no way you could have inhabited that character without understanding me. I felt that way, for example, if you remember Eddie Murphy is the old Jewish guy. Yeah. He does a better Jew than any Jew I know.
Of course he does. He's an actor, and he was around them. And, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so this idea that
again, it goes back to what? It goes back to the fact that we have a lot more in common with each other than we.
Well, but in order to unlock that, though, don't we have to have enough safety to? And this is kind of this puzzle for me about the weird social justice movement. If you create cancel culture, you're telling me that it is not safe to open my mouth and say something.
That's right. Your ideas are harmful.
Therefore, I'm not going to even bring them up to a conscious level because they're far too dangerous. What if one of them came out of my mouth inadvertently or in a joke that went south? Now you've got a really serious problem, which is, what if some kind of bigotry and some kind of prejudice is just, it's garden variety. It's not very interesting. It's universally distributed. Everybody has it. That's probably, I have multiple feelings about how I feel about different people in different circumstances. If you don't allow some of this stuff to bubble up and come out your mouth and look at it for the brain fart that it really is, then you're going to sit there weirdly guilty. either angry that you can't say that you want to be able to say it,
yourself.
Or you're going to say, wow, I really am ashamed that I actually think.
Well, I always say, all of us in my, I think I have a joke, all of us have at least 10 thoughts an hour, maybe a minute that would get us fired. I mean, and thank God, by the way. Jonathan Haidt, I don't know if you've heard him talk on this subject, but he wrote The Coddling of the American Mind and The Righteous Mind. He's just, I love him. But he said that there is this, he compares it to the Corazon of the Philippines, I think that's who they were called, who would gain status by killing the most people, essentially your enemy, and you take their heads, or you take a trophy, maybe a piece of their hair, and you gain status that way. You got more women that way. And this is an example of a sick culture. I don't give a shit how pure it is. It's a sick culture.
Right.
And there are a lot of examples of that. And we seem to be in some pockets of this country. There is this you gain status by finding the racist, by finding the bad guy, according to your orthodoxy, according to your puritanical idea of what a human being should be.
It's a scavenger hunt that's gone out of control, like Pokemon for bigots, and there aren't enough bigots to play it.
It's not new, though. It's a form of the Inquisition. Yeah. It's not new. This again, human beings love purity. They love the idea. You get these people who love the idea of trying to purify and create their own utopia, which a lot of historians have written about. The most dangerous thing a human being can do, the most dangerous thing a movement can endeavor to do is to purify or create a utopia. Because what you'll do, and if you have any questions, see Mao's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, Stalin's Russia. I mean, Stalin would have people killed because they had the wrong idea of what communism, and then you take whole groups because they've already been corrupted. Their brains, you can't really re-educate them. They're too old. So they're all wearing glasses. Anybody who's wearing glasses is an intellectual. They read a lot. They have a lot of this poisonous capitalist stuff in their head. Let's just bring them out to the killing fields and let's get rid of them. That's what happened throughout history. That's what happens when you have ideologues running things, because they're not smart. They're fanatics. They don't open themselves up to other points of view.
I don't know why nobody ever talks about this. It's exactly what you're saying. This issue that purity is weirdly the most dangerous concept we have. When people try to purify, terrible things happen. And we have a ritual on Friday nights. We have a weekly Shabbat dinner. And in our family, we take the Shabbat cup of wine and we put 2 drops in it. And there's always this question, why do you put 2 drops of water in the wine beforehand? My interpretation is that it is us learning to live with impurity, that these 2 drops of water can bother your mind. Well, now the wine isn't pure. It's been watered down. It's adulterate. It makes no effing difference to the wine. And it's teaching the way I view it is it's teaching my children to avoid becoming fanatics about purity. When I think about the off-ramp, I don't know if you've ever seen this in Saudi Arabia, on the road to Mecca, there's this wonderful off-ramp that says, Muslims only, Mecca this way, all others, this is your off-ramp. And I think about that and I think, wow, I wonder how much of the division in Islam between the things that go towards this jihadist craziness and the things that make for this wonderfully rich, welcoming culture. In some ways they're inextricable, but I wonder how much of it has to do with which portions of the culture have learned to live with impurity.
Well, look at our culture. Thomas Jefferson owned 600 human beings when he wrote all men are created equal, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed with their creator certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He owned 600 human beings when he wrote that. I mean, our peculiar institution, I mean, slavery, we've been a country with slavery longer than we've been a country without slavery. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a freer, longer-standing democracy throughout history. We are a modern country precisely because we continue to wrestle with that inconsistency.